Hi everybody, we're going to take another dynamic range test, and this time I think I went for a real torture test in terms of using, well, I've got snow outside and ice and sunlight, so let's just take the camera out into one of those absolutely worst case contrast situations and see what it does. And I got some interesting results, and while I was at it, I also decided to throw in a neutral density test. I got one of these brand new Break Through Photography ND filters. They claim that it's supposed to be the most neutral filter in the market, and there's a lot of tests on the internet that say that it is. I compared it up against a name brand filter that I'd had for a couple of years, and I was kind of surprised because, well, their claims were right. So check that out. That's mixed in the middle of this, and let's just get right into the test. Here is the Astia profile, and I'm just going to dial the shutter speed around on some of these, but there's a lot of good highlight detail that's being held by the camera regardless of the camera profile. Now the shadows did block up a bit here, but it's still recoverable. This is 10-bit, and the one thing I've found is that the camera will let you push the image around quite a bit. The FLOG and Eterna profile gives you a bit more detail in here, and the highlights are still holding well. We've switched to FLOG, and I just applied the straight Fuji LUT onto this particular shot, and I'm just bracketing around. Now here's the Schneider ND filter because I wanted to get down into a little more realistic exposure, and the image goes pretty magenta. This image shift really kind of surprised me, but I'd done a little bit of internet research that said that some ND filters really did shift around. Let's take a look at this Break Through Photography ND filter, and I haven't done anything with this. It really is that neutral out of the box. And I was really kind of surprised because I'm always kind of skeptical about advertising and claims, but in this case it really turned out to be true, and it was really refreshing to see that these ND filters really are neutral. Now you say, well, why, who cares? You know, I can just grade this out. But the point is, that takes time, and if you think about the amount of time that it takes to make all these fixes and corrections, that the amount of money that you're saving, you know, $100 in the price of these filters, is just incredibly well spent money to not deal with fixing these things. And there, when I slid it across, you could really see the difference. Well, this was a very interesting learning lesson, and you know, shooting tests like this is the place where you want to figure these things out, not on real jobs. So here's a look at FLOG, and you know, again, I'm seeing very similar highlight handling, but I think with FLOG we're getting more detail in the shadows just using the straight LUT on the image. I'm not really doing anything with this. And of course, you know, I'm just sliding the exposures around to keep everything exposed properly. So I really like what I'm seeing here in terms of the highlight handling with the XT3. There's a lot of gradation and subtleties in the highlights that not all cameras capture. Certainly I've shot this very same sort of material with like a Canon 5D, and that was just atrocious. And the XT3 is definitely hanging in the pack with very nice highlight handling. One thing I did kind of struggle with when doing these tests was the 6 stops of ND with the Break Through Photography filter just wasn't quite enough. Now, in their standard round filters, which is what I used here, they only have some odd values. I think like 3, 6, 10. And an 8-stop ND filter was really kind of what I wanted here, but they didn't make it, so I considered maybe I could double up and add a 2, or just skip up to the 10. Now, I'm using the round filters here, and they're reasonably priced, under $200, I think about $180. But if you want the 4 by 5.65, these filters go to $500. It's really kind of crazy. Meanwhile, you can actually get the 4x4s for a much more reasonable amount right in the middle. So I might say, if you want to use these filters in your matte box, scoop up the 4x4s. Now, since I wanted to use this on the Fuji for gimbal use, I was kind of stuck going into the route of round screw-in filters. Maybe I'm going to want to actually get a very lightweight still photography 4x4 filter holder, also 100mm, and use that instead. And maybe I'm going to swap this filter out or sell it or whatever and just go all 4x4 since I can use that with my matte box. So I'm running through this Schneider filter again and checking out how it works or it doesn't, and I had to work kind of hard to get this image to look the way it did. It wasn't just as simple as going a little minus magenta. Definitely took some finessing, and I actually put a soft matte around the sky to pull that back down and resolve. The FLOG definitely was a little bit easier to work with. And now we got rid of the filter. This is what it just looks like, fairly straight, light on here, and a little lift in the shadows. Now, you might have noticed that my exposure's been jumping around a bit, and I was just trying to get a handle on exposure with this. FLOG with an ISO of 640, I just couldn't get a good combination of shutter and aperture. But switching to one of the regular profiles and using the dynamic range set to 100%, I found that I could get my shutter speed down to where it should be, 1/48th or 60th, and I could get a reasonably wide open aperture. If you want to get into FLOG and shoot that outdoors, then I think pretty clearly you're going to have to actually maybe go to that 10-stop filter in order to get down to 1/48th and be in that 2.0, 2.8 f4 range, depending on exactly your shooting circumstances outside. If you see some moire in the bricks, it's not the camera. The camera is so incredibly sharp sometimes that you'll find that it will stress out the scaling algorithm in your software, or sometimes just in the video scaler if you shrink it down from 4K down to 1080 or a little bit smaller. And that's just one more set of tests that I like to do when I get a new camera to see how the camera's dynamic range works, where it's biased, highlights, midtones, shadows, how it's going to respond when you push it over the edge too high, too low, and just to get a feel for it, because, you know, again, when you take it out into a paying job, you don't want to be messing around trying to figure this stuff out. You want to be confident in your gear and how it's going to work and how it's going to perform. And so far, yeah, I've actually taken the XT3 out and snuck some shots of it into a broadcast show a couple days ago. So that was my camera broadcast debut, so I'm pleased with that. We got a couple of shots, and you know, that's what I bought it for. I bought it to be a fast, quick, lean B-roll making machine, use on a gimbal, second camera, second angle for an interview when you just got to be quick and fast, and you don't have the time, the budget, the resources to put up a full second camera rig. So I'm excited to see how this works once I have the chance to play this up against C300 Mark II. That is going to get interesting. Have some comments, have some thoughts, don't be bashful, leave them down below and let me know what you think. See you next time.